Hello everyone and welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. I'm G and we have just had Daru's hideout raided by both CERN and some sort of military. I don't remember if they actually said which military it was. Maybe they did. I'm just stupid. But anyways, let's get started. Akihabara was in uproar. There were lots of helicopters in the sky that probably belonged to the media. We escaped to the lab, making sure that no one was following us. It hadn't been that long since we were attacked at the hotel. If the cops found us at the scene of another crime like that, they'd be suspicious for sure. So we ran before the police arrived. Suzuha wasn't at the lab. Maybe she'd sensed what was going on outside and went to check on the time machine. We held our breath and waited. It felt like if we let anyone know we were here, more scary people would burst down the door and charge in.
Ashida, do you have any towels here?
Yeah, in the washroom. Maho nodded and brought a new towel from the washroom. She handed it to me.
Okabe, your neck's bleeding. Put this on it.
Huh? Oh, thanks. My neck was wet with blood. Fortunately, it wasn't a deep wound, so it wasn't long before it stopped. After handing me the towel, Maho sat down right on the floor and didn't move. I knew how she felt, especially since this was the second time she'd been attacked. And this time, people had died right in front of her. You okay, Hyajo?
Yeah.
She nodded hesitantly, but her face was deathly pale. And I realized that she'd been clutching her left hand into a fist this whole time, and there was blood coming out of it. Did you get hurt? Show me.
Huh? Oh.
Evidently she hadn't noticed she'd been hurt. She was looking at her left hand, confused.
Huh?
What's wrong?
My fingers won't move. That's strange.
Maho had been holding some small fragment in her left hand. Her hand had frozen around it and wouldn't move. Soon it started to shake. I grabbed her hand and forced open her fingers one by one. Whatever it was, she'd been clutching it so tightly that she'd cut off the blood flow to her fingers. They were very cold. When I finally forced her hand open, the thing she was holding fell to the floor. What was it? I picked it up. Oh. It was a red piece of magnesium alloy. It was a piece of Kurisu's laptop. She must have grabbed it off the ground when she was running away. If she held something so sharp, tightly for so long, of course she was going to bleed. I returned it to Maho without a word. She took the broken fragment and cradled it in her hands, and stared at it with an empty expression. Suddenly, a single line of tears dripped down her cheek. After that, it didn't stop. She continued to sob.
Kurisu. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Couldn't protect you. I'm so sorry.
It was as if that tiny fragment was Kurisu herself. She held it to her chest and kept crying. Hyajo, I'm sure Kurisu feels relieved.
Huh?
She's glad you're safe. So you don't need to apologize. There's nothing to apologize about. She didn't respond. Instead, a phone started to vibrate.
Oh, it's mine.
Maho took out her cell phone and looked at the message she received.
It's from Dr. Laskinen.
What's wrong?
He says the office and hotels were ransacked. His and mine. They're a mess, he says.
I see. Whether it was the Rounders, the Russians, or whoever had first surrounded the cosplay shop, they must have been after Kurisu's laptop and hard drive. There's no backup of that computer's data, right?
That's right.
Then this is for the best. What Kurisu left behind won't be used as a tool to kill billions of people. In the end, I got what I wanted. The data was destroyed before anyone got their hands on it. There was so little left that I was sure there would be no way to restore it. Wait, why did the Russians destroy that computer? Didn't they want to get their hands on it? Russia's in the lead in the race for the time machine right now. From their perspective, it'd be great if they could get the laptop. But they'd probably rather destroy it than let someone else get their hands on it, right? They'd probably wanted to avoid a protracted gunfight with the Rounders in broad daylight in Japan. The cold way they made their decisions made me shiver. They really were professional soldiers. An amateur couldn't do that. So what do we do now? I'd rather not stay here if I can avoid it. Russia might not know about this place, but Moeka might. If the Rounders were on the move, then Tanoji downstairs might be involved too. We'll move at sunset. It would have been great if Suzuha had come back, but I couldn't get in touch with her. Maho was sinking into a warm bathtub. She could finally feel blood flowing through her body again. The heat melted the tension away from her muscles. Her injured hand hurt a little, but it wasn't unbearable. She felt like she'd come back to life. Once the sun had set, Maho and Rintaro had gone to Ferris, the cat-eared maid at Meikuinyanyan, for help. Ferris's home was at the top of a high-rise condo building on prime Akihabara real estate. From a security perspective, it was superior to the Future Gadget Lab in every way imaginable. Ferris welcomed the two of them, offering them food and a place to sleep. And now she'd even offered them a bath. Maho was a little worried about Itaru Hashida. He'd insisted on staying to wait for his younger sister Suzuha, and remained alone at the Future Gadget Lab. More than an hour had passed since then. Had Rintaro heard anything? And even if they'd moved, that didn't mean this place was safe. The group from this afternoon could attack at any time. She couldn't help but feel nervous. And that made her feel terrified and vulnerable as she sat naked in the bath. She got out of the bathtub and hurried to the changing room to wipe herself down. She tried to put on the change of underwear Ferris had given her. And her hands started to shake. Then her knees buckled and she fell to the ground.
It was extreme muscle relaxation after a period of elevated tension and then sudden release.
She tried to stay calm by analyzing herself, but that didn't mean she could do anything but lie down.
This is bad.
Alarm bells were going off in her head. She'd just about given up, knowing that it would pass with time when Ferris popped her head in.
Maho-nyan! How's the water? Meow!
Ferris screamed and started to panic when she saw Maho naked and lying on the floor.
Maho-nyan! He's going to die! Maho-nyan's going to die! No, it's fine.
Maho's voice was so weak that Ferris didn't even hear her.
I need to get her to the bed.
Ferris tried to pick up the naked Maho, and then slipped and dropped her.
Yeah.
Maho hit the back of her head on the floor. She saw little stars dancing across her field of vision.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Sprawling naked on the floor, face up, Maho tried to force herself to stand, but her arms were too weak.
Listen, this will pass soon.
But Ferris wasn't listening. For some reason, she decided to reach around Maho from behind and try to drag her up. And then Rintaro must have heard Ferris's scream because he ran in. What's wrong, Ferris?
Eh?
Uh,
Yeah?
She wanted to scream, but all that came out was a tiny whimper. I'm really sorry. I mean it. Rintaro lowered his head deeply towards Maho as she lay on the bed.
You don't need to apologize. It was an accident.
But she still couldn't bear to look at him in the face. Just remembering the despair and embarrassment she'd felt when he saw her naked body made her want to bury her head in a pillow and flail her legs back and forth. To make matters worse, she still hadn't been able to stand up after all that, and Rintaro had been forced to carry her to the bed. She'd never been touched by a boy before, and so it was only today that she realized how rugged male arms were. Being carried was extremely uncomfortable, to the point where she'd squirmed around and almost slipped out of his arms. So she'd had no choice but to curl herself into a ball and let Rintaro do whatever he wanted with her, which made her feel really strange. And now she couldn't even bear to look at his face.
Yeah, it was my fault for panicking like that.
Ferris was sitting next to Rintaro, feet under her knees, with her shoulders slumped.
No, it's fine. I'm sorry for scaring you, in fact.
You're sure you're okay? You don't need to go to a hospital?
All the tension caught up with me is all. I must have really worried you. I'm so embarrassed.
There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Anyone would be scared after what happened today. Anyone would feel sick.
Even you?
Yeah.
I see. It's a mess for now, yeah. You can think about what happened and what you're going to do next after you're feeling better. That's right. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Thank you.
Maho closed her eyes. The lights went out, and Rintaro and... Oh my god! Apparently I'm dyslexic. The lights went out, and Rintaro and Ferris left the room. She lay on the bed and tried not to think about anything. She could hear the pounding of her heart. It would get louder, then softer. The rhythm was very strange. And she could hear a kind of static noise mixed in with her heartbeat like a broken TV. Was it exhaustion-induced tinnitus? Whatever it was, once she noticed it, she couldn't sleep.
When I think of it, Okabe said he was taking some tranquilizers.
She wasn't supposed to do this, but if she looked at their ingredients, she could tell what medications had what effect. Should she take a look and have him lend her some? If that wasn't possible, she could at least get some over-the-counter antihistamines to use as a sleep aid. She turned over.
Don't yell. Do what I tell you. Otherwise, you're dead.
Suddenly, she heard a voice break through the unpleasant noise. She gulped and leapt out of bed. Terror-stricken, Maho tried to crawl to the door, but her legs wouldn't move like she wanted to. She couldn't stand up. The voice in her ears followed her wherever she went. It was like a wild animal toying with its prey. All of the hairs on her body were standing up on end. Her jaw was chattering so hard she bit her tongue. She desperately crawled across the carpet and towards the door.
Do I have to kill one of you? Stop! No! No! No!
Yajo, wake up! She woke up to find herself being violently shaken by the shoulders. She looked around the room, panting. She was in bed and Rintaro was looking down at her. Her whole body was sweaty and she felt sick. There was a burning sensation deep in her stomach. What's wrong?
Someone's here.
Rintaro looked around. Ferris came a moment later, as well as the older man who was her butler. They were all simply standing at the entrance of the room, concerned. I'm sure it was just a bad dream. The antique clock on the shelf said that at some point it had gotten past 1 a.m. She must have slept for hours without realizing it.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it was just a dream.
She took a painful breath and wiped the sweat off her forehead, without realizing that she sounded just like a little child. She sent Ferris and the butler back to their rooms. Rintaro brought her a towel from the washroom. You're really sweating. You should wipe yourself down. She did as he said and wiped the beads of sweat off her face, chest, and limbs. As she was deciding whether or not to wipe the inside of her pajamas, Rintaro took the hint and turned around. I'm going back to my room. Call me anytime if you need something.
How's Hashida?
Oh, I just got word. You met up with Suza, huh?
I see.
Good night. Rintaro was about to leave her bedside. But Maho, she couldn't believe she was doing this, reached out and grabbed the hem of his shirt without thinking.
Wait. Please, it doesn't have to be for long. Just stay here.
Yajo.
Don't leave me alone.
Maho was surprised by the words she was saying, but the thought of spending this terrible night all by herself was too much for her. Rintaro must have understood how she felt, because he nodded without smiling. Fine. I'll stay with you till you fall asleep.
Thanks. Sorry for asking you to do this.
No, it's fine. I had a hell of a time getting to sleep myself. I'll turn around, so at least wipe off the sweat.
Okay.
While Rintaro stared back at the door, she took off her pajamas and wiped off the thick layer of sweat that covered her whole body. She tried to put her pajamas on again, but they were too drenched for her to want to wear them. She had no choice but to dive back under the covers in nothing but her underwear, and bring the comforter way up over her chest.
It's okay now.
Amidst the dim glow of the nightlight, Rintaro brought a chair to the side of the bed and sat down. I'll be watching over you right here, so you don't need to worry about a thing. You know you'll be safe, right? You worried?
No, I'm fine.
Maho's face felt hot from some feeling that she didn't understand. She sank deeper under the blanket and turned away from Rintaro. She softly closed her eyes. She could feel his presence behind her. The two of them stopped talking, and the only noise was the distant sounds of night coming from beyond the curtain. How long did they spend like that? Just as she was about to fall into a light sleep, she heard a soft voice in her ears. Yajo? Are you still awake?
Huh? Yeah.
She felt herself waking up again. She opened her eyes and turned back towards Rintaro, only to see him staring toward the window. It was as if he was trying to see some sight that lay beyond it. His profile is so handsome. For some reason, that was the thought that came to her.
What's wrong?
Rintaro seemed unwilling to talk, so Maho decided to speak first. He swallowed loudly. I really meant to tell you this a lot sooner. But I don't have the courage. I'm sorry.
What are you talking about?
There's one thing.
One thing?
One thing I haven't told you. Maho leaned forward, not caring that he might see her chest. I told you about the other world line and the Kurisu I met there. About the time machine and the time leaps.
Yeah.
About Kurisu and her dad.
Yeah.
There's actually one more thing I should have told you. But I just couldn't. His head was slumping forward in the chair. Maho waited silently for his next words. Despite the late hour, she heard a helicopter in the distance. For some reason, it sounded really loud. She hadn't seen the news, and it was possible that the media was still talking about the gun battle that had taken place this afternoon. This was something I needed to tell you, and you alone. When he finally spoke, his expression was unlike any look she'd ever seen on his face before. It was pained, sad, and suffering, like someone at the bottom of a deep, dark place. And yet there was something in his eyes that hinted at incredible self-hatred and rage.
Okabe?
Suddenly her chest felt like it was about to burst from pain. She didn't know where the pain was coming from, but she wanted Rintaro to stop looking like that. That day, at the radio building, the one who killed Kurisu was... His hands were forming some kind of shape, like he was holding an invisible knife. The one who killed Kurisu was...
Enough!
She screamed, unable to take it anymore. She rolled out of bed, forgetting how she was dressed, and covered Rintaro's hands with her own.
That's enough! Enough! You don't need to say any more. I believe you, so you don't need to tell me. Someday when the time comes, I'm going to make you tell me whether you want to or not. But that time isn't now. Until that time comes, keep your mouth shut.
She strengthened her grip and forced him to let go of the invisible knife. Rintaro nodded without saying another word. They simply stared at each other for a while. Maho couldn't look away from his gaze. It was as if he was clinging to something or wandering in search of salvation.
Chew.
She sneezed. Oh, so it wasn't just her saying it. Oops. Going to catch a cold. And it was only then that she realized that she was holding Rintaro's hands while wearing next to nothing. Rintaro looked a little embarrassed.
I'm sorry.
She quickly jumped back in the blankets. She curled up into a ball and tore at her hair, screaming inside her mind. She let a boy see her naked not once, but twice.
This time I'm going to bed.
Sorry for bothering you.
You're not bothering me at all. Never bring that up again, okay? Okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Yacho.
I haven't done anything that you should thank me for. Anyway, good night.
Good night. The room got quiet again. The adrenaline rush kept Maho awake. After a while, she heard snores coming from Rintaro's direction. Evidently, he'd fallen asleep. He must have been tired. He went through the same attack that Maho had. Of course he was. His breathing wasn't peaceful at all. It was pained. He may have been in the grip of some terrible nightmare. Maho hesitated several times, but finally she turned over and stretched out her hand from the blankets. She softly touched the backside of his hand. She felt its warmth on her fingertips.
Did Kurisu call you, I wonder? Okabe? Or was it Rintaro? Maybe?
She didn't know, but it didn't matter.
Hang in there, Rintaro Okabe. Is the man I fell in love with really that weak?
I tried to think about how Kurisu would say those words. And eventually, Rintaro's breathing started to become more peaceful. Relieved, she let go, and then she changed her mind and grabbed the hem of his shirt again. She felt embarrassed, as if she was a little kid, but at the same time, she felt like now she might not have any more nightmares. That night, for the first time in a very long while, she dreamed of a smiling Kurisu. Maho and I stayed at Ferris's house for several days after that. Now that Kurisu's computer was destroyed, the odds that anyone would come after us had gone way down, but there was still a chance. Just to be extra careful, I stayed away from the lab. Maho, Lintalo. Dr. Leskinen looked a little thinner since the last time I'd seen him.
Professor, I'm so glad you're safe.
You too, Maho. Sounds like you had a rough time. Dr. Leskinen held Maho tightly in his huge arms. The difference in size between them was so great that Maho looked like some kind of stuffed animal.
Professor, that hurts. You're hurting me.
Dr. Leskinen and Maho were leaving the country in the afternoon on a weekday, so I was the only one who could see them off. Since I'd been with Maho the whole time, instead of only seeing them off, I'd actually just brought her there. Maho, after all, was the kind of person who was incapable of getting to an airport on her own. I was amazed she survived this long given her lack of basic skills. We'd held Maho's goodbye party last night at Ferris's house. Ferris was there, and so were Mayuri and Daru and the others from the Christmas party. All were sad to see her go. Intelo, thanks for staying with Maho. You've really been a great help. Not at all. So, when can you come to my lab? Huh? Wasn't kidding about that, huh? I'll study hard so I can go as soon as possible. Can I contact you when I'm ready? Of course. I'll be waiting. He smiled as he took my hand and shook it. I was really glad to hear it. After meeting Amadeus, my desire to go to Victochondria had only increased.
Let me say thanks, Okabe. Really. If it weren't for you, I might not even be alive right now.
You're exaggerating.
No, I mean it. I'm really grateful. I'll be waiting for you too, so do your best.
Yeah, you too. Good luck with your research. So, Lintelo, as we discussed previously, I'm going to be revoking your access rights for Amadeus today. That's fine, right? Yes. Evidently they couldn't leave me with access to Amadeus after they left the country. I was only supposed to test her during their stay here anyway. Want to say a final goodbye to Kurisu? Yeah, you're right. Can I say something to her quick? Of course. I tapped the icon for Amadeus.
What? Do I get a goodbye too?
Kurisu was expressionless for some reason. I guess so. Do not need one.
You said goodbye to Maho before me, right? He did.
Maho interjected before I could speak.
I hope so.
Kurisu was inside my screen. Was it a good thing that I had spoken to her like this? Or a bad thing? In the end, I knew I needed to forget about Kurisu Makise, but I couldn't. I couldn't escape from this curse. Once I lose access rights, we won't be able to see each other anymore, will we?
Well, I am slightly grateful that you gave me someone to talk to. There's a chance you're coming to Dr. Leskinen's lab, right? I'll make sure to remember you until we meet again.
You're such a tsundere.
Tsundere? What's that? Don't use words I don't understand.
Then why is your face red?
He's blushing.
Kurisu was just very shy.
Jeez, not you too, Professor.
Stay healthy. Probably isn't the right thing to say. You don't get sick. Don't tease Hyajo too much.
Right. You don't need to tell me. I already know.
I hope so.
I hope someday your smile doesn't look so sad. I hope someday you can smile for real.
I guess even an AI could see right through me. Kurisu Makise really was one hell of a woman.
Bye.
Yeah. Kurisu disappeared from my screen. I turned to Dr. Leskinen and nodded, deleting the Amadeus icon from my screen. We'll handle the paperwork for the access revocation on our own later. Thanks for your help with the testing. We got some really valuable data. No, thank you. I bowed deeply to both Maho and Dr. Leskinen. As I watched their plane take off into the distance, I noticed that it felt like there was a hole in my heart. I clutched my phone tightly. Its connection to Amadeus was gone. Presage or recognize. Oh.
Kagari, from now on, you're officially my daughter.
This was when Kagari was 6. She'd been living in a facility for war orphans and getting treatment at a dedicated clinic next door. It was a completely different place than the normal hospitals, which were overflowing with casualties from the war. It was an idyllic garden shut off from the despair of the outside world, so that children could live in peace. That was where she'd met her mom. Mom, Mary Sheena, was a Class 2 caregiver at the facility who was always very nice to her.
Really? You're going to be my real mommy? Yep, that's right. Yay, mommy!
It was impossible to express with words how happy Kagari had felt. Being Mom's real daughter meant that Kagari had become her real name. Kagari became Kagari Sheena.
Hey, don't hug me so tight. You're so spoiled, Kagari. And I can leave, right? I can live with you, right? I'm sorry. It looks like you need a little more treatment.
That's right.
Oh, doctor.
Kagari didn't know the doctor's name, but he was a nice old man who was always kind to her. It's going to be another 6 months, and then it's over. You'll just have to hang in there until then.
6 months? We talked about this before and you said 2 weeks.
I was referring to her physical wounds. The post-traumatic stress suffered by children during their great bombing of Tokyo far exceeds that of adults. And we learned at her exam yesterday that she's still having nightmares.
Is that true, Kagari? That's not true. I don't have nightmares anymore. It's all fun dreams. Fun, fun, fun.
Kagari, it's not good to lie. It'll only make your treatment take longer.
Aww.
You told me yesterday that you wake up with nightmares all the time still, didn't you?
Yeah. My, I see.
It's proof that the memories of the bombing still exist in her mind as terrifying experiences. If we don't treat them properly, it could lead to irreversible consequences.
You're right.
So you don't mind if we continue with her treatment, do you, Mom?
Well, of course. Kagari, let's do our best and beat the bad sickness, okay?
Mom rubbed her head. Kagari felt so at peace that she could cry.
Okay.
Yup, that's my girl.
Okay. See you later, Kagari. Mommy.
Mom took her hand away. And instead, the doctor took Kagari's hand. She was taken to the usual room. There was a white reclining chair and next to it some kind of mechanical system connected to a headset.
I can hear the same voice as always.
You need to protect your mother. Protect this world. That's why you were born. She couldn't remember when she started hearing the voice. But by the time she was 6, whenever she was worried, uncertain, or in trouble, she could hear it. It was always kind and strong, and it always cheered her up. In Kagari's childish mind, she'd started to think it might be the voice of God. Since only she could hear it, everyone else said it was just an illness. But Mom was the only person who believed her.
I need to protect Mommy, so I need to work hard at my treatment.
Kagari's young heart was filled with the hope that she could someday live with Mom. As soon as she opened the door, Kagari Sheena was struck by an unpleasant wave of heat. It was early June, and this was the first day to hit summer temperatures. It was hot enough that just walking outside could cause you to sweat, but this small Japanese-style room had thick curtains and the windows were closed. The room was dark and cramped, and there were so many clothes on the floor that there was no place to stand. It wasn't just clothes. There were all kinds of filthy things. Bags with half-eaten snack bread still in them, half-rotted food packs, plastic convention store bags overflowing with trash, all scattered around the floor. And the area around the half-naked girl sitting against the wall was covered in bandages, and gauze soaked with blood and pus. There were bandages tied around her exposed stomach, chest, and limbs, but these too were soaked with blood. The room was filled with a sickeningly sweet stench, though there was no way to know if it was coming from the garbage or coming from her. The owner of the room, Malka Kiryu, raised her head and looked at her, eyes filled with hope.
Four. You're still alive?
When she saw Kagari, who was still wearing her shoes as she came into the room, her shoulders slumped.
You're not FB. Who are you? That's an awful thing to say to the person who saved your life.
Malka gave a painful cough and spit up some stomach fluid mixed with blood. It stained her thighs and the floor. Her wounds must have opened again because the bandages around her stomach began to turn red. She'd spent 5 months like this, with no treatment from a doctor. Malka had gotten into a gunfight with the Russian army and failed her mission as a rounder. She'd lost 2 of her companions, and her target, Kurisumaki's laptop, was also destroyed. They pinned the blame on her. She was wounded and almost killed. It was Kagari who saved her and brought her to this room. But if someone with a gunshot wound went to the hospital, the police would be notified. And for that reason, she'd never gotten any real treatment. Her wounds had become infected, and even 5 months later, they still brought her incredible pain. Her terrible fever hadn't let up at all, and it wasn't rare for it to go from 39 degrees to over 40. But Malka didn't seem very interested in her wounds. She was more interested in sending messages with the phone in her hands. She must have been sending more messages to her beloved boss. In the past 5 months, she sent almost 1,000.
Hi. FB, why won't you answer me?
FB was Malka's boss in the Rounders. A woman who always gave orders to Malka via text message. Malka worshipped her to a degree that far exceeded what could occur within a normal employee relationship. The shock of being abandoned by FB had hurt her many times more than her actual wounds. Kagari tossed the bag she'd slung over her shoulder at Malka's feet, along with 2 plastic bags. The backpack was filled with medicine that wasn't available without a doctor's prescription. Along with it was a whole box of illegal drugs used only for the treatment of severe pain. Normally, these would be kept under strict control at a hospital where no normal person could get them. Both of the plastic bags were filled with canned goods and other things Kagari had chosen because they had the lowest probability of spoiling.
If you don't feel like living anymore, tell me. I'll bring you poison instead.
But Malka didn't seem to notice Kagari at all anymore. He was completely unresponsive. Kagari had gotten used to her attitude over the last 5 months. But she wasn't just going to go home today. He wordlessly reached for Malka's cell phone.
What are you doing?
Malka tried to resist, but evidently she had no strength left. Kagari was easily able to grab the phone. It was covered in blood and pus, but Kagari forced it into her pocket without hesitation.
Give it back.
Malka started crawling towards her. It was like something out of a zombie movie.
Don't get the wrong idea. You've got new orders from FB.
Malka froze.
Orders from FB? Yeah, take it.
Kagari took another cell phone out of her pocket. It was the same Japanese cell phone that Malka had been using minus the dirt and bloodstains.
The phone you've been using is under surveillance by the Russians and Americans, so she can't use it. So from now on, your orders will come in via this.
Malka reached a trembling hand out toward the phone. And in an instant, she snatched it away and clutched it to her chest like it was her own child.
Will FB send me messages if I have this phone? You should have some already.
Mocha quickly opened the screen on the phone. When she saw the words on the screen, tears started to flow down her face. M4.
M4, my beloved daughter. It must have been so hard for you. I know it was hard for me. Your failure was fortunate. I'm very glad you're alive. Better and wait for my next message, okay? It's time to complete your mission successfully and regain my trust. I believe in you from the bottom of my heart. My beloved daughter, from FB. You didn't need to read it out loud.
Of course, this message wasn't from FB. Kagri had written it herself. Keep someone at the brink of death for 5 months, then give them exactly what they want as bait, and you can easily put on anyone under your control. Kagri knew this well. The life suddenly returned to Mocha's face. She spilled out the contents of Kaguri's backpack like a woman possessed.
I want to get better. I need to regain FB's trust. That's right, M4.
Kaguri smiled, satisfied, and knelt down in front of her.
I'll treat you. Take off those bandages.
When Kaguri left the apartment, the sun had set. He spent several hours treating Mocha's wounds. Her hands still smelled of medicine. It wouldn't go away for days, possibly. She sighed and put on her full-face motorcycle helmet, then went to the parking lot and got on her bike.
I wonder if I'll hear the voice of God soon.
She whispered. She took off on her motorcycle. Oh boy. Oh good. It's always good to have Mocha under Kaguri's control. That could not possibly go wrong at all. But also, I think this is a pretty good place to cut it. I am really hyped to see where this goes because I have no idea, honestly. Some of this I know, some of this I don't know. I don't, I think we have one more ending before we even get to the true ending. I'm not even sure. But for now, thank you all so much for following my playthrough of Steins Gate Zero, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye now.